Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone from wherever you are around the world. Welcome to our Youth Forum Green Horizons webinar. How is climate change impacting your work and advocacy, and what are your adaptations or mitigation strategies? This topic was selected by the Youth Forum, and they have been instrumental in the complete organisation of this webinar. I would like to congratulate them and name them: Alice, Joanne, Lauren, Letitia, Ellie, and Mirth. These 6 young Soroptimists are full of ideas for the future, and I want to encourage them as much as possible because they are your and my future. This is a call out to other young members. You only have to be under the age of 40 to join, and we need more members. So what about you becoming part of this? And you will learn more about how to join towards the end of the webinar. This topic on climate change is one that affects most people around the world in many ways. We see changes in our climate everywhere, in our weather patterns, across our farmlands, throughout plant and animal habitats, in the food that is available for us to eat. In fact, the list has become endless. Scientists are documenting the effects of such climate-related shifts, which largely stem from global warming caused by humans and are already affecting daily life, our health, economy, livelihoods, infrastructure, and much more. We are recording this webinar because many who would like to attend are just not able to because of the timing. In fact, 2 of our young forum are now, I hope, fast asleep in their beds. So I'm very grateful to Alice Palm, Joanne Johnson, and to Hannah Smith, our SI Advocacy Policy Advisor, for taking the lead in this event. May I now introduce them to you? So will you just give a wave when I call out your name? Alice Palm is from Italy, and Joanne Johnson is from the United States, and both are the Federation representatives on the SI Global Impact Committee. Hannah Smith is a member of staff at SIHQ and is our Advocacy Policy Advisor. I'm going to hand you over now to these 3 young ladies, and the webinar is now theirs to control. So attendees, I hope you will sit back, enjoy, and take part because we're going into breakout rooms after we have heard from our speakers. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much and welcome. I have the honor to introduce our speakers of today. The first is Lisa Mazzon. She is a younger member working in the sustainable bonds sector. Lisa is passionate about sustainability and climate action. She is dedicated to helping businesses navigate the path towards a greener future. With a background in finance and environmental science and over 5 years of experience in the field, she had the privilege to work in different countries with different organizations, assisting them in measuring, reducing, and offsetting their carbon footprint. As a climate enthusiast, she is also the founder of Caldo, a blog that aims to make the science of climate change and sustainable development more accessible. The second is Kira Pollack. Kira is a graduate student at the University of Minnesota, where she studies Eastern's hemlock conservation and teaches undergraduates how to identify trees. Her professional interests include science communication and connecting youth and adults to their local outdoor spaces. Prior to beginning her master's degree, Kira worked as natural resource technician for Great River Greening, an environmental nonprofit emphasizing volunteer involvement in park restoration, and a crew leader for the Conservation Corps and the IE Youth Outdoors program, in which teams of young adults lead the teens aged between 15 to 18 in environmental education, leadership development, and natural resource fieldwork. While pursuing her bachelor's at Macaulay's College, Kira spent her summer at camps encouraging kids to build deeper relationships with themselves, each other, and the outdoors. The third speaker is Mary Muia. Mary is the founder and director of WEMA, a community-based organization working to transform the lives of adolescent girls and young women to access quality education, prevent gender-based violence, including ending harmful practices towards young women, early child marriages, and teenage pregnancies. Mary is also one of the Soroptimist international representatives at the United Nations Environmental Programme in Nairobi, where she participates at the UN Environmental Assembly and other international meetings. Mary is dedicated to empowering women and girls to emerge as global and community leaders. She is passionate about the environment, climate change, gender equality, food security, water and sanitation, and is a champion for human rights and access to adolescents and youth reproductive health, family planning, maternal and child health, access to basic services and livelihoods for women and girls living in informal settlements and rural settings. Thank you for joining, and I will give the floor to Joanne to introduce the discussion.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us, whatever time it is for you, morning, evening, afternoon. We're going to spend the next about 35 to 40 minutes having a panel discussion between our three panelists that Alice just introduced. And then we'll do our breakout rooms for a bit and come back and have a quick wrap up after that. So thanks to our guests for joining. My first question is for each of you to answer. And so I think we'll just go in order of introduction to start with. So we'll go Lisa first, then Kira, then Mary. And then the second question will reverse that. So to start off with, what are some challenges you're facing in your work due to climate change? So we'll go ahead and start with Lisa.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Joanne, and thank you everybody for the invite, for being here. I think it's an absolutely important topic to discuss. I'm very happy to contribute to this conversation. Maybe just Alice introduced me just to in order to structure the answer. What is my work in the field of climate change? So there are basically two different hats. The one being Lisa in the business world somehow. So I work in this company which is called Climate Partner, and we help private business to calculate, reduce, and offset their residual emissions. So it's very vertical in terms of climate change, specifically CO2 emissions. And then the other hat is the one about Caldo, which in Italian means hot. And it's a blog about climate change where I try to write these sort of fun and short articles about the topic of climate change and sustainable development in order to make it more accessible and understandable, for example, to my mom, to my dad, who are not really experts into the topic. So to make it more accessible, exactly. And regarding your question, John, I think it's more related to my hat as a climate partner, business developer. And I would say that the main challenge I face when I speak with companies of different sizes in different countries is really to sort of connect the impact that they have in terms of sustainability. So if they embrace a sustainability journey to the economic impact. So there is this very strong link in between. So the question is always, okay, if I invest this money into this sustainability journey, what is the return on investment? And I think it's on the one side, there is a return on investment. For example, if you install photovoltaic panels on your buildings, but at the same time, I think this question is sort of questionable at the very beginning because it reflects a very capitalistic mindset. So why do you need a return on investment if you implement something that is sustainable? And sustainability for me means something that you can sustain in the long run. So I think in French, it's the translation is durabilité, so something that lasts in the long term. And that is the essence. So what will happen at some point if we keep going for the economic road, but we completely ignore the fact that this world has limited resources? There will be no future in economic terms if there is no future in sustainability terms. So I just stop here, and in case I keep talking too much, just mute me, please, because I can start talking and not stop for a long while.
Thank you. No, I think that conversation about binaries and how we frame sustainability as either or will come up a lot. So let's move on to Kira then.
Yeah, and thank you, Lisa. I also wear two hats in my work. There's one as my current job, I'm a researcher as a grad student, and I am studying an endangered tree species in Minnesota. And so climate change plays a role because where our plants can live are going to change. So there's one aspect of climate change means that things that used to be there won't be there, and things that weren't there could be there. So it's a little bit of a puzzle of figuring out, in my field, it's called assisted migration. Do we help, and how much? And then as someone who loves working with youth and young adults, doing education and communication, there's a lot of anxiety. So I am dealing with the worries of what is the future? Will there be a future? What am I doing now that I won't be able to do, or what's changing? And so the opportunity there, though, is that when we get people outside and empower them, so I worked with field crews and brought them outside doing natural resource work, then they at least have in their back pocket, oh, there's something I can do. I can plant a tree. I can remove non-native species that are crowding out native species. There are things that I can do with my own hands when I'm feeling really anxious that I know are making a positive impact. All right, Mary, all yours.
Thank you very much. And I'm very excited to join you from Kenya, Nairobi. It's an afternoon, very lovely, sunny. And this dialogue reminds me about when I'm 14 years old and I'm an adolescent girl and a young girl, and I'm not able to go to Form 1. I am not able to go to secondary school. So I have a health background, and as a grassroots women leader in an organization that is dealing with young girls, my focus is on basic health care, basic services, from nutrition to accessing immunization, accessing family planning services, and generally getting families to be healthy and to access health care. Now, for the longest in Africa and in Kenya, we have battled a lot for about over 4 decades now with HIV as a national disaster. And HIV alone has really shown us so many ways to be able to attend to communities' health in its entirety. So comprehensive approach to healthcare for families in Africa is what my organization does. And the challenge that we now face is we have found out that health and climate change, health and environment are so much interlinked, and that we do have weather-sensitive diseases, and we do have conditions that are actually related to our weather patterns or the environment where our families are living in. I will give you an example about a prolonged drought when we don't have rains and we don't have water. That alone presents with a lot of challenges and health issues that affect families, especially girls and young women, in a big way. The same is the opposite when we do have floods, which is again another weather-sensitive occurrence. The health of families become so jeopardized. We have very increased cases of diarrhea diseases. We have cases of waterborne diseases, and we actually have other non-communicable diseases which ordinarily are not available, but have become to be seen in our clinics. I'm talking about tropical diseases like schistosomiasis and certain worms that we never used to see. But because of flooding, we now get cases of families presenting with such cases. So health, climate, and environment and gender for me is a very big connection. And so I do find out that to address health issues, climatic challenges and environment challenges are important for us. And this is what I find a big challenge, because as we address what the families can do, certain other things at the policy level, so we must do action at the community level and also do advocacy at the government level for certain things to be put in place. So yes, climate change has affected health in a big way, and that is the focus that I usually do with the focus group that I work with in my organization.
Thank you.
Thank you, and over to you.
Yeah, I think we sort of touched on I was going to ask a question about how you're adapting, but you all sort of started to incorporate that into your answers. So I think we'll go ahead and dive into individual questions to let you elaborate a little bit more on what specifically you're doing. So I am going to reverse this now and start with Mary this time. So I'll read the question to give you a couple seconds to get prepared here. But the first one I'm wondering about is, in your work and as the founder of WEMA, you include a lot of different programs and activities that empower girls and young women. As you were mentioning, you make them more economically resilient as well as confidence. So how do you incorporate climate resiliency and sustainability into those projects?
Thank you so much, Joanne. And I'll just begin by explaining the connection between preventing poor sanitation environment for school-going young adolescents as one of our interventions that we do with school-going adolescents. And here we teach and we are able to bring life skills into the schools to help the young girls and the school-going community to begin to plant trees in the environment. However, when we teach about tree planting and the importance of green environment, we also look for sources of water, and we begin to ask them about whether they have access to clean water. And most of the times the answer is no. And in terms of making that sustainable, we work with the schools communities to be able to have, rain. We have got we gather the water from the roof, and we do roof catchment, and we are able to construct reservoir waters, which can be used by that community in that particular school. However, when it goes to the community, now we teach about school clubs that are having connection with the household. And what they learn in school in terms of preserving water and using water to grow their food, their kitchen gardens, vertical gardens that we teach them. Then they also go at home and they're able to begin doing the same and also establishing tree nurseries that a lot of times the nurseries are able to be to have different indigenous kind of trees that will be sustainable in that particular location. Because if you go to the highlands and into the lowlands, we require different kinds of trees, and the more indigenous the trees are, the more sustainable they will be in that particular environment. So we incorporate food security, nutrition, tree planting, and also health. And we kind of have a life skills program that is all round, beginning from schools and going to the families and working with both the teachers and the families to sustain an environment around a given school. So we take that on until the girls are at puberty and they have begun their menstruation. And so we also now come with menstrual hygiene program. And here we are able to really bring on board sustainable products that can be able to be used by girls, and provision of sanitary pads, and the education that goes with breaking the stigma around menstruation. So we bring on board the boys in the school community, and we bring the parents together for that. What this makes it sustainable is that most of the parents begin to see an opportunity for economic empowerment with the activities that are bringing food security at their homes. And this sustained the girls in school, and we have increased cases of girls that can complete one level of schooling and the other, and mobility to the higher levels of education. So really, we now are able to rescue girls that ordinarily would have been married off when they're children. They would have dropped out of school because of pregnancy, or even they could have faced violence because they don't have access to school, or they don't have access to basic health care needs that they require. So adaptation, I should say, is both from a health point of view, but we also go socio-cultural and eliminate barriers of participation for both boys and girls to participate equally. Thank you, and back to you, Joanne.
Thank you. Wow, you were really hitting all of the upstream impacts there. That's such a great holistic model. Next, I'm going to move on to Kira there. So we'll go sort of in reverse order and back and forth. So my question for you is, you work with youth, or have worked with youth, as you talked about, similar to Mary. So why is it important for you to connect people to outdoor spaces? How do you link sustainability to creating more resilient communities, much like Mary was talking about that connection between land, community, and resiliency?
Excellent question. It starts with the Baba Dioum quote, which I'm going to misquote surely. It's almost 7:30 in the morning here in California. I'm at a conference, which is really fun, but it also means that mornings are hard. So the quote goes something like, we protect what we love what we know, and we know what we've been taught. And so if we think about conservation being a taught skill and not an innate value, then we need to encourage a love for the outdoors. And it doesn't have to be a very big, broad anything. It could be that a kid loves climbing on rocks, or there's one plant that they really like the feel of the leaves or something, and encouraging that, and starting from as young as we can get them. As someone who loves environmental education, it's excellent to watch. When I get kids, they're usually middle high school-ish age, so somewhere between puberty and 18, maybe. And if they haven't been raised outside, I live in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is very urban. And there are parks, but that doesn't mean that everyone has access to them. So for some folks, they're very comfortable outside. And for others, you'll see them the first time we bring them outside, holding back, staying close to the vehicle, clearly uncomfortable, unsure, asking if there are bugs or snakes or things that they should be worried about. And it is part of my job, not just to lead the project, but to really focus on what are those attitudes, and are we making people feel safe? Until they find something that really sparks an interest, and they start asking questions, and they start doing the work. And how does that lead to resilience? And I probably missed a part of that question, so if I did, let me know. When we build a community that cares about the environment and about each other, because we know that all of these things are interlinked, we are more resilient to change. When effects of climate change do come, we can pivot better. Like I mentioned earlier, when we have those tools, those skills, even if none of my youth become natural resource professionals, they know something about their outdoor spaces. They might move away, but they'll look for their parks. They might get a job in business, but maybe they'll donate to environmental causes. It's not that I want everybody to be as in love with trees as I am, but to find something that they love and to pursue that passionately.
Thank you. That makes me want to go outside and go on a hike or something. I love it. So next we'll jump over to Lisa. This is a little bit of a pivot, since, as you said, you get to sort of represent our industry side here, whether that's really, it's not all you do, but thank you for bringing that perspective in. So what do you think are the most important actions that the private sector is supporting in order to adapt sustainable principles in their development strategies? So does that look like policies? Does it look more like social changes like Mary was mentioning? Is it investments in specific industries or other mitigation strategies? So what is the private sector doing in the sustainability space?
Yeah, it's a very interesting one, and also I would say a huge question. So I'll try to approach it starting from why I think the private sector has a key role to play in this, let's say, fight, although I don't like to call it fight against climate change. So I was lucky enough last year to be at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. So for those who are not super familiar with that, the COP is basically the, let's say, biggest conference on an annual basis where all the governments and key players at economic level join to discuss about climate change and how to approach it. And to be honest, I was a little bit disappointed by what came out of that conversation. So COP27 means that there were 26 before. This year we will have COP28, which means there were 27 before, and it will be held in Dubai, which is also a little bit controversial, the idea that a conference about climate change is hosted in one of the biggest oil producing countries in the world. And that the speech that last year had the president of COP28, so at the inaugural event of COP27, there was the president of COP28, so the one held this year in Dubai, and he said, we will keep, who is, by the way, an entrepreneur and one of the owner of the biggest oil companies in the world, he said, we will keep producing oil, but we will do that in a more sustainable way, which to me was not really clear, because it's not a matter of how you extract oil, it's a matter of what is the impact of that oil in the world. So, and at the governmental level, I thought that what came out of that was very, at the high level, was very at the policy and at the policy level, but not really concrete. So for me, I need to be pragmatic. And that's why I focus on the private industry, on the private sector, because I see it as well, somehow as a pyramid. You know, on top of the pyramid, you have those with greatest power, who is definitely the government. But that is a giant which is a little bit difficult to move. It's not really easy to implement changes at the governmental level. And we saw it with this 28 COP over the past 30 years. The level of CO2 emissions in the atmosphere has kept increasing. So what were these COP for if at the end of the day, the level of emissions of CO2 in the atmosphere is still increasing? So what has been done? And that's why I thought, like, in this pyramid, at the lower level, you have the private sector, because they do have power, not as much as the governments, but they are also very agile. So if you talk to an entrepreneur who wants to embrace a climate journey, they can do that very easily. If they put the money, if they invest in it, if they have resources to do that, then they will do it. It's way quicker than what a government could do. And then, in my opinion, at the bottom of the pyramid, there is me, Alice, Mary, Kira, all of us, so the individuals, which definitely are sort of the engine that moves all this pyramid, but at the same time, at an individual level, we do not have a lot of impact in terms of emissions. So I'm talking about quantitative terms. If you consider, on average, a European city every year generates, let's say, around 10 tons of CO2 emissions. If you think about a company, I was working in Zurich for a fintech company, so in the financial industry, so it's services. So we didn't produce anything, and we generated, on average, 16,000 tons of CO2 emissions. So that's why I say it's fundamental that the transition, the change passes through us. But if we want to have numbers delivered in the short term, we need to focus on the middle of this pyramid, which in my opinion is the private sector. So what can they do? For me, the first step is to measure yourself, right? So the first step is to balance, to step on a balance and understand what is your level of CO2 emissions. It's a little bit like summer is approaching and you need to do this bikini test, to try your swimsuit, and it's always tough. We all know that, but at the same time, that's the starting point. Once you know where you stand, then you can implement reduction measures. You can leave out of your diet carbs and whatnot. So you know you can implement a strategy, a method to reduce your weight or emissions or whatever you want to call it, right? So that's exactly the same principle that you need to put in place with companies. And then once there are these targets defined, you need to have something substantial behind it. So if I hear about some entrepreneurs saying, okay, we set a net zero target at 2050, I honestly don't care, because in 2050, the CEO of that company will probably be retired in some Polynesian island. So I want to know what is the model behind it. What are the reduction measures that you implement to get to that point? So today you're here, you want over the next 30 years to reduce your emissions. Of course, you want to grow as a business. Of course, you want to make more profit. Fine, do that, but how do you reduce your emission? How do you decouple these two different curves? That's the essential part. And again, making statements is the easiest part, but really having a strategy behind it, methodologies to reach these targets. What we do for work is basically at the company I work for, and it's really not publicity. That's why I'm not even saying the name. It's really to implement these models. But those are theoretical models at the end of the day. I can tell you, you need 100% renewable electricity. You can shift your fleet car to 100% electric vehicles, but you need to have the resources to do that. You need to have the investment, the upfront investment to buy photovoltaic panels and put them on your rooftop. So this is what I think is the role, the power, but at the same time, the challenges of the private sector. So yeah, I took it a little bit from the outside, but I hope, Joanna, I was answering your question.
No, thank you. I love that idea of the model of sort of speed and power, right? And I'm going to jump from you to Kira, actually, because thinking a little bit about, you mentioned, individuals, we often are the most agile. We are the fastest to respond. We read an article and say, I'm no longer going to use plastic straws. But also that within that, we have sort of the lowest impact on a global scale. So I'm wondering, thinking about Kira, especially working with youth, I talk to youth and they're aware of global climate change and the threats from it, but they're also pretty aware that them as an individual, they can only do so much. And I think for all of us, that leads to burnout. So I'm wondering, how do you keep young people really motivated in both their environmental activism and their individual work, and sort of not falling into that feudal state of, well, I'm not a government or a company, so what can I do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I'm still definitely working on. Because it is true that our voices matter, and I think this generation coming up is getting loud in a really helpful way. But absolutely, they're hitting a wall. A lot of the youth that are concerned aren't 18 yet, which is our age for voting here in the States. And so, I mean, they can talk to their parents, but do their parents share the same ideological views? That's a great question. And for some of our kids here in St. Paul, their parents may not be registered to vote. They may not be citizens. So there are lots of things that are impeding youth voice. But encouragement, I now work with a lot of college students who, several of them came to this conference with me. It's the Society of American Foresters, and so they're meeting employers at many levels, the private sector, the state and federal government level, and they are both hopeful about some of those things and frustrated. And I think that a lot of what I want to do is empower that frustration into action. And sometimes that means all I am is a cheerleader. And I will say and, not or, connecting people to those who can make that change. I think we are all connectors. We all know people who know people, And that's a really excellent way. When we get frustrated, it might be, I can't do something, but I know someone who can, or I know someone who knows someone, and pulling that up the chain until we have bigger change. And when all of us are doing that, that's a lot of ripples. And I'm hopeful for the future for that.
Oh, that made me hopeful. Thank you for that answer to a kind of a downer question there. Okay, I'm going to pivot a little bit again and jump back to Mary, because I think you have a really interesting perspective here, working within different communities and really harboring some of what Kira was talking about there with that collective action, right? Of mobilizing everybody in a space. So we know from science at this point that the impacts of global climate change are disproportionately impacting low income and historically low emitting countries. So sort of the opposite of what Lisa was talking about with Dubai, right? We know now that these countries, that their carbon footprint over the last 50 years has been low, but they are feeling the most impact, whether that be natural disasters or just overall changes in environment, so they can't produce food and different things like that. So when you think about all this, dealing with these sorts of communities, how do we address or focus on equity in our environmental activism to really kind of address that mismatch there?
Oh, thank you so much. I think the two speakers have already opened it very well. And for sure, yes, the most disadvantaged countries and communities suffer most, yet they emit less. And yet they again have the opportunity to contribute towards bringing solutions. Because if you look at the lifestyles in either dimension, when we talk about reusable, recycling, and reducing, those are concepts that are easily applicable into the global south. But if you look into it, into the factories, manufacturing, and the production, high-end companies, then these countries don't have as much as the other countries in the north. And so the big question that we beg to see is that when it comes to green economy, the blue economy, and investments towards getting solutions towards this, whether it is in terms of decarbonization, whether it is in terms of alternate energy sources, who and what can we do to have more investments being brought to these communities that are suffering the most? And of course, it is easy because designing projects and with communities like this in mind will give us that opportunity for them to be able to say, this is what will work, this is how we see it working. But only if they are on the table, only if they participate meaningfully, and only if they are part and parcel of the whole process, and that resources are availed. So if we must do anything less, I think it's to advocate for both national and regional governments, including global organizations, to really think about investing in green and blue economy so that we can be able to combat decarbonization in a very equitable way, that those that are majorly affected get resources to be able to bounce back and to be more resilient. And those that are emitting more get to also practice and reduce and get measures to be able to actually not continue polluting the environment in the magnitude that we always see. So I come from the background that women and children, young people in the global north are doing so much. They are making reusable items. They are making, they're doing all what they can, whether it is a construction industry in every sector. They have come up with innovations that can actually save the environment, including what I talked earlier about planting trees. But the resources are not there, and they don't get the good attention of the national government, because government will come up with a broad action plan, but it will not include what is really happening at the grassroots level. So that inequality in itself is what we need to address. And we need to continue to press for climate justice. We want to continue pressing for inclusivity for vulnerable groups. And we also want to keep pressing that solutions are with communities, especially indigenous communities, wherever they are, whether it is in the Amazon, whether it is in the Congo Basin, the Congo forest, whether it is in our forest here in my country. There are people that live in those forests that understand that better than a foreigner or better than somebody from another community. So that equity and balance of power and availability of resources will go a long way. And finally, investing in our children and youth, it's definitely going to help a lot, because then we have a new crop of people, new generations that understand that we are doing this because it helps us, not because it will help our children. It helps us now, but as well, it will help the children of our children. So I see a lot of need to invest into children, young people, women and girls, for us to have solutions in climate action.
Thank you. I love that urgency and passion. And you really took sort of Kira's idea there of collective action and amplified it on a global scale in such a beautiful way of not just solidarity, but of really supporting one another in a really lovely way. And you talked some about new innovations and ideas. I think to me that connects to, I work in the public health world, and a phrase we often use is focusing on the margins. And that means focusing on the marginalized voices, shining a light on those people who have the innovative ideas, but as you said, haven't had a seat at the table in sort of our historical power structures and hierarchies. So really lovely to hear. And I'm hoping in our small group breakouts, people can maybe build some of those connections. So for our last individual question here, I want to jump back to Lisa, and you I think either in your introduction or you talked briefly about, you have this lovely blog where you talk a lot about different topics in climate science, sustainable development, and that's your way to really sort of bring out education too. Again, I'm sorry, a big question, but maybe just one thing, what is something that makes you hopeful about the future and present of sustainability, an initiative, or maybe connections you're seeing between private and activism, something bringing you some hope these days?
So yeah, thank you again. Another big question. I think, I mean, if there is no hope in the future, then we are just done, you know? So that's sort of the condition that generally moves the world. So you need to think that the future is going to be better than the past. Otherwise, you don't really have any reason to move forward. I think what we saw, for example, so the activism that you mentioned, I think, is a big part of what happened over the past year. So I started to work into the topic of sustainability and specifically climate change in 2018, at the time where Greta Thunberg started to be a little bit on the media, and there was this movement. So I hear different opinions. I have conflicting thoughts about the Greta Thunberg, but I think other than I'm pro or contra, I think what we need to recognize is that she was able to bring this topic of sustainability to each of us. So she made it more democratic. And scientists are talking about climate change since decades, but I've never heard about it before. So that's a first starting point. And then she was able to create this movement. And it's not only about those generations that probably I'm not really belonging to that one, but a little bit older. However, this generation is really fighting for its future. And I like the fact that it's really sort of something that moves their hearts. And they're fighting not for this football team or the other football team, this volleyball team or that. It's really a fight for their own future. So I think it's a huge cause. And it's great that they're moving it forward and that they are engaging to this conversation. I'm a bit, I have, as I said before, a little bit of controversial thoughts in the sense that you cannot just always be criticizing what the government has done, but you also need to come up with solutions, right? So Greta and her fellow Fridays for Future activists are basically the engineers, the economists, the medical doctors of the future. So they also need to come up with solutions. So this is the change in the mindset that I hope to see from them coming at some point soon, not just saying, okay, you politicians destroyed our world, which is probably also true, but now, so what? What are you going to do? You, who will also probably be the politician of the next 10 years. So this is actually what I'm thinking a little bit about this one. And generally thinking it, yeah, again, my mindset is that we need to be positive of the future. We need to think that it's going to be a huge challenge ahead of us, but it's also in our hands. So with a scientific approach, and again, I think like the role of individuals is very important. But if you ask me, what are you doing in your life to change your lifestyle? I'm not probably going to say I went vegan or vegetarian. I do that. I try to fly as less as I can, but I think the most power we have in our hands is the power of being citizens. So when we go voting for one politician or the other, that is even more important for me than just eating vegetables and not meat, because that is really the way to channel the decisions and the economic resources that will be dedicated to a transition to a more sustainable future.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to have, if Mary and Kira could answer in less than a minute each. My final question, Lisa, you really got it. One piece of advice for young advocates who want to see a more sustainable future. And I think Lisa hit it there with being solution oriented and thinking about how to be a citizen. So really briefly, Kira and then Mary, one piece of advice for young advocates.
Okay. My one piece is find the thing that lights your fire, because we can't do it all, and take breaks because you will burn out.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think for me is that the time to act is now. And you don't need it's not rocket science. Do what you can do at your level and where you are, and begin to make that a movement. I know it starts small and then it will scale up. So start today and it will grow and we will change the world together. That's my advice to the young advocate. Today is the day. Please start something today that will get into a movement.
Lovely. I'm going to hand it over now to Alice to introduce our breakout topics, and maybe we can get some stuff started with these conversations. And thank you to all our panelists too. I know you can't hear our clapping, but we can imagine a round of applause for you.
Okay, thank you everyone. I'm going to introduce this section. So thank you, Mary, Lisa, and Kira for all of your really insightful answers. So we would like to continue this part of the webinar by giving all of the participants the opportunity to speak together to discuss some questions that we've prepared for you. So if you can please look into your chat box, I have put in 3 different questions. So the topics are climate apprehension, which we have touched on already. The second question is about environmental sustainability, and the third question is about generational sustainability. So I would ask if you can please take a note of the questions, copy, paste them to a document so that you have them when you're in your groups. We would just ask that when you do go into your groups, which will be randomly assigned, if you can please choose or select one person who will report back so we can have a quick feedback session afterwards. So I'm just going to pop you into the groups, and while I do that, I would just some people dropped out. I'm not sure.
Hannah, how many groups did we have total?
There were 6 in the end. Yep.
Okay, so I'm hoping that each of you had self-assigned somebody to report back out. We're just going to do this really rapid fire. And do hold on till the end, because Hannah's going to send you or give some information about follow-up actions and surveys. But I'm going to ask each of the people who were reporting out to raise their hand in the on the Teams chat, and then Hannah can unmute you so you can share. And if you can just give in 1 minute some notes or some thoughts out from your discussion, as well as mention which question you were answering. So I already see a hand. So Hannah, if you want to go ahead and unmute people.
Yeah, so Karen Cromer, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay. Can you hear me? All right, I'm Karen Cromer Johnson. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And my group took the 3rd question about generational sustainability. So some of the things that we talked about were Soroptimist clubs working with schools, and especially schools in cities where they didn't have as much green space. It was good to give the kids an opportunity to get outside. Karen is myself. I'm also a teacher in grade schools, and so I talked about some things we're doing, such as outdoor classrooms and taking kids for nature hikes, snowshoeing in the winter, that kind of thing. We also Sharon talked about in Scotland where they have open farms and nature walks. Some of the activities that we thought we needed to be involved with more global citizenship, more civics teaching in the schools, maybe more participation with Girl Scouts and Girl Guides, and also ways that younger people could interact with older people were things like TV shows where they have intergenerational groups in the TV shows, and also podcasts where you have younger voices, but now it's accessible to the older generation. Thank you.
Just a quick reminder, as we somebody else raised their hand, mention which question at the top for us. Thank you. All right, we've got less than 5 minutes. So if you were someone reporting out, please raise your hand so we know to unmute you. All right, we see Inge.
Yeah, you should be able to unmute yourself. Ingo?
Yes, can you
Yes.
hear me?
Thank you. Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay. We answered question 1, Mary from Kenya, all known, and Natasha, I think she might be from Germany or Austria or Switzerland, I think. And we talked about how important it is to work on club level, having partnerships with other organizations. We did not provide a PowerPoint, as we can see now. And we said it should be fun. We should not talk about future is lost, it's all dull and gray, but having nice actions and sustainability within, I think, the European Federation is not the highest topic, and it should be more connected with the other SDGs actually, and given more examples why it is important, not only in, for instance, Kenya, as there is less water than it is in Europe, but we should provide really good examples to the clubs over in Europe as well. And perhaps having around the 5th of June, a large campaign, sustainability. And then working with grassroots, going back to the base, club members and clubs. And if clubs find it quite difficult to do some advocacy or awareness actions, perhaps provide them with examples, with letters they can use, they can send to local governors and so on. So we talked about more about the not really very concrete actions. We had a level higher, I think. And Karen, nice to see you again. We met in Dublin. Thank you. I hope it was all clear.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes left, so I'm hoping to hear from 2 more groups. So if you could please raise your hand if you are ready to unmute. Anybody else willing to share out? Even if you maybe weren't an assigned share, but will have a final thought or two to share.
I can add something if you want, just to while we were sharing into different rooms, Tineke weren't able to join any rooms, so Anna, Maureen, I, and Tineke just talk about the first question about so what as Soroptimists we can do, and what came up to our mind was also what coming from what Kira discussed before. So to be cross-gender association that is spreading out everywhere in the world, we can like build up a supporting tool to make a connection available between different people, also from different ages, in order to prevent or make a little more worries the problematics that the climate change make us feeling. So as one of our speakers talk today, Kira in particular, that we need to take breath as action. So what we can do as Soroptimists is also to make this connection possible, and for example doing activities such as planting trees. That was one of the suggestions made by Tineke, in order to collaborate and also take this brief in action.
Thank you. Any last minute comments? Otherwise, if not, we'll move on to a little bit of follow-up closing information from Hannah.
Okay, thank you so much everyone for participating, and for to the ones as well of you who have offered to feedback what you have discussed in your groups. So just quickly before I pass over to President Maureen for some closing remarks, we've just prepared a short feedback survey. It will literally take a few minutes. I'm going to pop it in the chat just now, and we would be really grateful if you can take a few minutes of your time just to fill it out and let us know how you enjoyed today, what we can do better for next time, etc. So I will send it in the group, in the chat box just now. I'll also circulate it via email, probably on Monday, but here you can have it just now anyways. And with that, I'll just pass to President Maureen for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, ladies, for attending the webinar. I just have been asked to close it and say a few words, but before I go, I just want to say I really enjoyed this afternoon. I have learned an awful lot from our speakers. I've taken some words from them and I close with their words. And I thank you for participating. I know that it coincided with another webinar that was going on this afternoon, but to those people who did come, a big thank you. And here's just some of the words that I've taken from this afternoon. Some of the critical building blocks in response to climate change are mitigation, adaptation, technology, investing. So we need to find a way of curbing our greenhouse gas emissions from our human activities, and we've all given some good examples here this afternoon. We need to explore activities that will reduce our vulnerability and to build resilience within our key sectors such as water, agriculture, and within our own daily lives. I think we should try to systematically and effectively address the gender-specific impacts of climate change in the areas of food security, health, agriculture, human rights, and peace and security, and of course, water. We need to look at women's involvement in the development of new technologies so that they can be user-friendly, they can be affordable, effective, and sustainability. And women, especially girls, should have equal access to training and skills development programs to ensure their full participation. Leadership was mentioned, and the role of women's groups and networks need to be strengthened. Currently, women and girls are underrepresented in the decision-making processes, so we need to get in there. We have great knowledge. Women, and especially Indigenous women, have a wonderful knowledge and experience on issues related to the management of natural resources. So we need to get in there. So today is the day, and everyone who's here, part of your advocacy role is that we need to encourage governments to incorporate gender perspectives into their national policies. I've taken some words from the three speakers. You need to make them listen to you. You need women and girls to be positive. As Lisa said, we have the power as citizens. Kira said, find out what lights your fire. I thought that was wonderful because education is my passion. It's what lights my fire. But education and climate change do go together. And Mary said, the time to act is now, and it's not rocket science. Just do what you can do. So I would like to say a huge thank you to our speakers, to Mary, to Kira, to Lisa, for bringing their personal perspectives to our webinar this afternoon. And a big thank you to Alice, Joanne, and Hannah. What you have done was incredible, and I'm so looking forward to what you're going to pick as your next topic. It may not be in my tenure as international president, but I will be joining you on whatever you do as you go forward. So to any other young Soroptimists or young friends out there, we want you to join us on our forum. We need you. We want to hear your views and the issues that affect you because you are our future. So I would just like to say thank you so much. Please fill in the poll that Hannah has set up, because it will help us and it will give us permission to actually be in contact with you, because you have to give permission for us to use your email address. And to those who haven't filled out the survey form, I'm going to ask you now that Hannah will circulate this to all the people who actually attended, and we will get your feedback, because I think it's very important, especially to our young people's forum. They want to hear what you think. So thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye.
Thank you.